So, folks, before I continue my thought process on the status of or the preparedness or the ability of the Indian Defence Forces, which I said is directly linked to the investment in them, that's directly linked to the economy, directly linked to the subsequently to the R&D. The R&D spend, like let me just encapsulate, has to come from the government because long gestation periods ensures that the private sector is not going to invest in R&D. India has no R&D to talk about. India has no investment from the government to talk about. The start at the earlier part of India's independence was good when we established all these PSUs, but they were not funded adequately. And we didn't have the technology, absolutely. The rest of the world, it's very clear from their example that it's the government that invests. It invests through the university system and development R&D, and then into the private sector like Raytheon. Like Stanford was the biggest funnel for development of armed forces platforms and new technologies. Right? In India, we don't have that, and without that, what do we do? Right? Without that, the only option that we have really is, because we don't have an economy that's humming, we don't have an education system that prioritizes things like aeronautical engineering, nuclear engineering, etc. We have all software engineers now. In fact, we don't even go into civil engineering, and hence the state of affairs of our urban engineering, the state of our urban cities, state of our roads, the quality of our roads, quality of our bridges. Your guess is how good is seeing all these bridges flow away. Your guess is as good as mine, right? Now, what about the armed forces themselves? I'm going to come to that. Before that, what's doing the rounds? What's doing the rounds is Trump and his speech in Davos, and how has got everybody talking about how Trump is treating Putin and Xi equally. Well, he's treating them more equally than India is concerned. Because I think that's where we kind of lose the analytical capability when we try and push India in it. He definitely thinks India is second tier. But to think that he's on the same page as Putin and Xi, absolutely not. Putin, he knows is degraded. In fact, he's offered to rescue his economy. But how's he going to do that, right? Oil. He wants to drill oil, then push the prices down. He wants to ensure that India buys American oil and not Russian oil. So what's Russia going to do? Russia's factories are empty. There are no people. 200,000 above plus people have died on the front in Ukraine. They have no people, right? So where's their economy going to go? And as far as Xi is concerned, that people keep thinking, they're at $14,000 as opposed to $60,000 per capita that the US has, right? The yuan's under pressure, the economy is under pressure, the population is fallen for the second straight year, right? So their economy ain't going anywhere. This is my point, because if you see for some of the stuff that Ruchir Sharma has said, that most of the economies will keep going ahead, either increase in population or improving efficiency. And there, China has maxed out. It's maxed out. It's got nowhere to go, right? And all the sanctions that have been imposed on China in technology are there to stay. Trump's he's already got that on a platter, so he can do what? He can have dinner with Xi, but he's not going to remove those sanctions, right? And believe me, if he doesn't get what he wants from China, he's probably going to put on that 10%. Well, so when he says make in America or pay high tariffs, Trump warns Davos, the impact is eventually going to be on the US economy, which means on the rest of us. Because what it's going to do is, and then he's telling the Fed to lower rates, and he's telling every other central bank to lower rates. The problem is Powell has come out and said that he has no right and he's not going to resign either, right? So there be it, right? Modi, Trump could meet in Feb either in France or US. So this whole thing, this whole process of Modi not being invited, it's really, really driving the bucks nuts in India, man. They can't figure out why not. The simple reason is actually the United States never invited dignitaries. This is the first time he did that, right? But we made such a big deal. You know, when you take foreign policy to the level of equating it to a person, right? It's bound to fail, right? Modi is a representative of India. It wasn't ever a relationship between Modi and Trump or Modi and Xi or whatever. That's where our foreign policy has gone totally awry. Okay. Great Wall of America, Trump vows to repel illegal entrants, slap steep tariffs, and the biggest problem here is going to be India. With 18,000 people already corralled, about to be sent back, a lot of them from the state of Gujarat. Right? India eyes US energy to reduce trade deficit, and people who are questioning why Ambani was there. First, he paid $1 million. That's obviously for the plate. Right? But there is family connections between Trump and the Ambanis. But do remember his daughter, Trump's daughter, and the son-in-law were at the wedding. Right? All the events of the wedding. So there is some connection. But this oil, since it's drill, baby, drill, and Ambani has the largest refinery. Well, that's why he's there in the United States. Plus, he also wants to make sure that he has, his major competitor is Elon Musk, who wants to get Starlink, and that's going to hurt Jio. Maybe Jio wants to do a joint venture with Starlink. Who knows, right? Because he doesn't have a satellite system like Bharti does, right? Then we have this: India must rise to America's 500 billion strategic challenge. Now, the problem is we could be part of it. But do we have the requisite human talent? Do we have the requisite risk-taking capacity in the private sector? Nada. Because we'll all eventually, essentially become, you got it, traders. Ahead of Quad meet, EM meets Australia, Japanese counterparts in Washington, India, France to jointly track Indian Ocean regions. Now, this is the stool, the one leg of the stool we have to stand on to counter China, right? Well, I'm glad that goes apace, but here we see lies, right? Private companies upbeat on investments and jobs, says CII. The sister publication, The Times, that's an economic, Times of India, says tech hiring slump. Top 5 IT companies see headcount drop by 2,600 in December quarter. Revenue and jobs may not grow at same pace amid automation. Now look at this. So what's the connection, right? One place you have, right? Poor demand hits investment by private sector in quarter 3. New investment by domestic private players fall 1.4%. So the economy that is needed to hum, to create talent, universities, are just not there, and as a result of which, do I see a future for the Indian defense complex to grow up? Probably not. But look at this, right? Iron Age kicked off in 4th millennium BCE in Tamil Nadu, says Talon. So Tamil Nadu is coming out and telling us that whatever we thought in North India is hogwash. Forget what the rest of the world thought. What he's saying is what we thought in North India as we being the cradle of our civilization is not there, right? Much, and this is the reason, folks, why I said we don't have a technical mindset, because our whole setup. Now, remember the IIT Madras vice chairman, because everybody out there now is being placed by the RSS, not based on their intellect capability, but based on their allegiance to the religion, right? Is that the best thing for our education? Probably not. UP cabinet takes a dip at Kumbh. And it's just too funny. Just too funny. And then right below that, much ado about Hussain, police sees artworks, lawyer seeks FIR against offending gallery. If this is the route we are going, right? And then this, 14 Maoists killed along Odisha-Chhattisgarh border. Soldier killed in encounter with terrorists in Kashmir. And this was a little earlier. 3 suspected Khalistan operatives shot dead in UP, and I believe there is no proof against those 3 guys. It was again an attempt to create the bogey of Khalistan. Is it right? Is it wrong? I doubt it is right. That's my call, right? Now, like I said, when you are going to tackle and grow your armed forces, the infrastructure, the defense complex, what you really need to do is grow, find leverage, which means New Delhi's best strategy for Trump is to make India's economy stronger. Don't be on back foot, and we are on total back foot, because look at these funny things I'm going to. Helicopter scam, SC to examine Michael's bail plea on February 18th. This poor fellow has been in jail, and he's been in jail only because he was supposed to name Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi in the Augusta Westland scam, and he ain't done it because he said I never met him. I had never paid them any money. So hey, he's still illegally in jail in India. Let me just tell you. It's probably a trade-off pawn for Malia or somebody like that, but it's not happening. Liquor sale hits new high on AI Express first Surat Bangkok flight. So you see what a sham all these bans are, right? Liquor bans in Gujarat, right? Outfox the dragon, as I'm told. Government of India must invest in smart planning and local technology ecosystems to counter China's defense economic ties. And that's not going to happen. There's no money, and the government has to spend the money. It's not going to come from the private sector, and that's guaranteed. So India needs to invest heavily in technical education and create the right incentives and linkages for indigenous semiconductor allied companies to come up. Note that Taiwanese engineers returning from US 70 in the 70s laid foundation of Taiwan semicon industry. Second, there is a case for transferring Taiwan to MEA's Indo-Pacific division from its East Asia division to dehyphenate Taiwanese issues from China policy. This will greatly help trade and investments with Taiwan in critical sectors that China doesn't want. Smart strategies are needed to counter Beijing's shenanigans. But the key here is, you need to invest heavily in technology. The balancing China question before India. This is important, right? Among these three potential choices, what exactly is likely to be India's preferred choice going forward? Are we leaning towards living with a China-dominated region with limited internal and external balancing and without a grand strategic approach to dealing with a rising aggressive superpower? Right now, it seems like that. Or are we actively looking for ways, means, and partners to balance China? India may have to make a choice. Making such a choice is a grand strategic matter for India today and in the future. Whichever choice we make, our future policies, strategies, and tactics will be determined by that choice, and choices will have consequences. There can be nothing without consequences. Nothing is for free. I think Ajay Shankar thinks everything is for free, I think, the way we keep trying to balance, right? Let's keep in mind that the history of balancing behavior among states shows the weaker powers always have access to a range of strategies to balance a stronger adversary. The gravest mistake a weaker power seeking to avoid subservience to a stronger power can make is to accept a balance of power that is heavily skewed against it. The question remains, will we repeat the mistake? And now, folks, how I think the Indian armed forces are being degraded, are being communalized, are being politicized. And this is a topic of discussion that really needs to be brought up. And I've got some articles that I'm going to read out, but this is the first nail in the coffin, right? Besides the Agniveer, right? And you only have to look at Pakistan to see what happens if your armed forces are politicized and communalized, right? So let's say when Admiral gets to helm China's PLA, and this is what we have to avoid and have to remember. The PLA is the military arm of the ruling Communist Party of China, and its first job is to defend the regime, not the Chinese state or people. In India's army, the first job is to protect India, not the party in power. It is to or the majority religion. It's to protect India, and you have to get this through your head, right? He says, in the Central Military Commission, the defense minister is usually ranked fourth behind CPC General Secretary Xi Jinping, who serves as its chairman, and two other military generals who serve as the commission's vice chairman. Now let's see what Raja Mohan writes. Biden's new geoeconomics. It promises to radically change international order and also create pathways to re-engineer Indian economy, and we may have lost that opportunity. He says, looking back over the last 75 years, the problem has never been the lack of room for India-US geopolitical cooperation. The trouble on the Indian side, at least, was the elite's default ideological positions, persistent pessimism about the possibilities with the US, exuberant optimism about partnering China, and a complacent over-dependence on Russia. So all my friends who hear me, especially my uncle, just remember this. Possibilities with the US, exuberance, optimism about partnering China, and a complacent over-dependence on Russia. And the conceptualization of BRI is just this, right? It just doesn't work. And the CDS that should have been and was not, right? As CEO Uday Bhaskar writes, the CDS that should be. Creation of CDS, theater commands, was to enhance combat efficiency. Results are mixed. He says, The major takeaway from the report appears perplexing and awaits clarification. The first pertains to the post of the YCDS in 4-star rank. Rank hierarchy is central to the military, and if implemented, the office of the CDS would be tenanted by 2 4-star rank officers, and at later stage complemented by 3 theatre command, presumably of 4-star rank. Concurrently, the 3 service chiefs, who are the original 4-star rank officers, would have a different profile that would be devoid of the command responsibility. And that's exactly what's happened. Then you have this. India's armed forces are a political, ensure that they remain so. Written by Manmohan Bahadur. A flurry of media articles has appeared on whether the Indian armed forces are being politicized due to the pattern of recent tasking and utilization, promotions in the high echelons of the officer cadre, and some activities that may not conform to the secular ethos. As a veteran commissioned in 1976, I have seen the changes in the positioning of the uniformed man and woman vis-a-vis civil society. The piece analyzes 3 strains that can discern. First, there is an increasing propensity among veterans to join the political process. This has been the worst. I've seen the Bhagwa veterans, they don't think about this country, right? Second, an increased public exposure by positioning uniformed personnel to face the media has been witnessed, whereas the civilian bureaucracy or politicians should be doing the task. Absolutely. Third, there has been an increased projection of uniformed personnel as being the only repository of matters of national security. This perhaps is a fallacy being propagated. It's true that there are scholar warriors and whose tribe is fortunately increasing. But do remember people like K. Subramanian. They were not defense force guys, but they were brilliant, right? And then my school friend B.S. Dhanwa writes, can Generals Chanakya, Kamandaka, Thrillivur help? Absolutely not. He says, GUI's idea of mining India's ancient texts for security strategy won't do much for India's armed forces, who need quality weapons and tech, domain expertise, and sophisticated modern military thought. Ancient wisdom should not be sought to tackle modern-day contingencies, even if their study brings solace to the restlessness in our minds. To try and decipher what our ancestors opted to do on the battlefield is an epoch long gone by, and absolutely true. So all those picture replacements of the 1971 war in the chief's in the chief's office, the installation of that statue on the Pang Lake is just BS. Civil military fusion will strengthen logistics. It would. Depends on how it's done, right? And Arun Prakash, he also puts it right. The rules of detachment. A recent debate in the US on keeping the armed forces political has resonance in India. It absolutely does. The problem that's happening now, folks, is at the senior level, because out of turn promotions and under the garb of efficiency and performance are leading to some massive distortions in the way the senior officers are performing. Right? Lastly, with a mixed bag of serving and retired officers to choose from, and with no methodology available for assessment of professional competence, selection will have to be on spoken reputation, political loyalty, and personal preference. Such subjective and problematic criteria are an invitation to arbitrariness and politicization. And that's exactly what they want, and that's exactly what has happened. He says, sustaining India's democracy requires that our armed forces remain detached from politics, and the nation's security demands that military leaders render unbiased professional advice to the government without fear or favor. Remember Manekshaw, right? Manmohan Bahadur writes, soldiers in social media age, recruits to armed forces must be disabused of divisive ideas on online platforms. And this is a big scare. He says the front line of a fighting force comprises a soldier, sailor, and airman. They are usually seen as disciplined followers who do not reason but just follow orders. They certainly follow instructions, but the modern recruit is an educated, thinking individual. This is an attribute that the senior leadership needs to tap to advantage, since in contemporary conflict, the actions of the Jawans at the frontline trenches may have a strategic effect on the overall conduct of military operations or even a nation's policies. Now, this is something that you must hear. National Monument, Cradle of Leadership, this is the NDA. Arun Prakash talks of it. He says, I returned 33 years later as its commandant to find that the institution had seen a vast improvement in many ways. What came as a nasty surprise was the advent of a new ethos which required a cadet to possess a basic skill set for survival. This included cheating, manhandling juniors, minor theft, even impersonation, all against the academy's rules and unheard of in our times. Even more dismaying was the benign and tolerant attitude of the training staff towards such misdemeanors. Right? He says, second, cadets must be constantly reminded that their countrymen expect the armed forces to be not only exemplars of integrity, professionalism, and excellence, but also steadfast upholders and defenders of the Constitution of our secular democratic republic. Their stand of conduct must always be distinct and above that of civil society, because the armed forces are their values and abide by their regulations. Finally, even as they are molded into uncompromisingly honest, upright, ethical individual, it must be impressed upon the cadets that moral courage is as important for a military leader as a physical courage, and the ability to speak truth to power must be seen as a cherished quality. Then you have this admiral who defended the Constitution. This is Ramdas. She writes, Admiral Lakshminarayan Ramdas, or Ramu as everyone affectionately called him, was more than a decorated chief of the Indian Navy. He became a known figure in the Indian civil space of social and peace movements. Ramu understood the civil space and its importance in a democratic society, and upon retirement shifted the attention and time here. Ramu would travel back and forth and reminiscent, steadfast to the ideas, the oaths he took to serve the country and its constitution. Agnipath has been the worst, and now everybody's trying to justify it. It's been the worst, has been one of the worst products for the armed forces. And Somnath Mukherjee tries to kind of justify it. Let's go down Agnipath. But they are not trained. Agniveer killed in JNK landmine explosion. First Agniveer dies in line of duty. Former officers slam policy denying pension. Another Indian serving in Russian military killed. And Agniveer has done this too. Now Indians are running away and finding employment in other armies. Nepal asked Russia again not to list its citizens for war against Ukraine. This has been the other fallout of Agniveer. Because now the Nepal has said, no Gurkhas will join the Indian army under this scheme, right? What's happening there? Sign up to fight for Wagner after India alter rules. This is again the Nepalese soldier in there. Agnipath plan took all three forces by surprise, says Narwane. All stakeholders agreed on Agnipath, says army chief. So he has to come out and defend. No, not yet for book by Narwane officials. Army reviews former chief's book on Ladakh stand-up dictate. If you're not fearful, let him come out with it, right? Then you have this fifth soldier dead, highly ranked LET man among two militants gunned down. Armed forces wait for a funds boost from budget, which is not going to happen even this year. The fact is, the armed forces get substantially less than what they asked for in 2023. The amount was 28% lower than what had been sought. It's going to happen again this year. Army is short of 2,094 majors, 4,734 captains. Shortage of majors and captains and units. Army may cut headquarter postings. And then finally, a depleting force, written by Ashok Mehta. Reducing manpower could hit army operational capability, especially in the Chinese border, because technology is not going to do it for you. It has to be hardcore, foot on the soldiers. The terrain demands it. 2023 is the year of transformation in the army. The buzzword is right sizing, not downsizing. An additional 100,000 personnel will be reduced on top of the 180,000 existing shortfall. Last month, the headquarters integrated defense staff ordered a 10% cut in manpower across the forces. These cuts are ad hoc, sans a strategic defense and security review. Now, what's happening on the Navy front? Let's finish that. Two firms emerge front runners as government begins 70,000 crore sub-deal talks. MDL, take KMS, bid for P751 submarine tender, clears technical evaluation. MOD moves ahead with submarine plan. MDL qualifies for next round. But here again submarines, you got to see the basic component. We have to become part of the supply chain of a platform that is globally sought after. If we are the end of what these guys are going to make, There will be no technology transfer. Even if there is, you're not going to be able to use it because nobody else is going to buy it. And hence, it is economically unfeasible. This is one thing that you have to get through your head in the MOD and whoever is making these plans. The only way out, folks, if you don't have the money, is to become part of supply chain of big platforms, just like Turkey did. Three cheers and Jai Hind.